The Galactic Coalition Academy sat on a moon that orbited a dead planet. It was the most famous military school in the known galaxy. Every species sent their best students here. They came to learn war, diplomacy, and how to lead fleets across the stars. Kong Taeho walked through the silver halls alone. He was human. That meant something here, and not something good. Humans had joined the coalition only 40 years ago. To the other species, that was nothing. Some of them had been traveling between stars for 10,000 years. They looked at humans the way adults look at children who wandered into an important meeting. Taeho did not mind. He was used to being underestimated. He had learned long ago that quiet people see more than loud ones. The academy had students from 30 different species. There were the Rithani, tall insect-like beings with 4 arms and compound eyes. There were the Velthari, who looked like walking trees with skin of bark and eyes like amber. There were the Korvax, small and fast, with scales that changed color with their moods. And there were others, dozens of others. Each believing their species was the most important in the galaxy. The humans numbered only 3. Taeho found his teammate in the research library. Yunhana sat surrounded by floating screens, her fingers dancing across data that moved too fast for most eyes to follow. She was an intelligence analyst, which meant she collected information and found patterns that others missed. She had a reputation for over-preparing. Some called it paranoid. She called it staying alive. "You're late," she said without looking up. "I was observing," Taeho replied. He sat across from her. "The Rithani students were discussing us. They think we'll fail the final exam. They think we'll fail everything." Hannah finally looked at him. Her eyes were tired but sharp. "Did you hear the announcement? The final examination? A hypothetical battle scenario." "Yes, each species designs a war strategy against a simulated enemy. The Dominion fleet." Hannah pulled up an image on one of her screens. It showed dark ships with angular designs like blades floating in space. They're basing it on an actual empire at the edge of the galaxy. The Dominion went quiet 300 years ago. Everyone assumes they're dead or sleeping. Taeho studied the ships. Everyone assumes many things. The next morning, the Academy gathered in the Great Hall. Admiral Voss stood at the center platform. He was Rithani, old even by their standards, with a shell that had turned from black to gray with age. He had commanded fleets before most students' grandparents were born. He looked at the assembled cadets with all 4 of his eyes. "The final examination will test everything you have learned," Voss announced. His voice echoed through the hall. "You will design a complete battle strategy against a superior enemy force. The scenario is based on historical data from the Dominion Empire. You will have 2 weeks to prepare. You will present your strategies before a panel of instructors. Only the top 3 teams will graduate with honors." A Korvax student raised his hand. His scales were bright yellow with excitement. "Admiral, what resources can we assume for our fleets?" "You may use any resources within reason. The scenario assumes you command a standard coalition defensive force." The students began talking among themselves. Taeho remained silent. He was thinking. After the assembly, he approached Admiral Voss. The old Rithani looked down at him with something between curiosity and dismissal. "Cadet Kong, what do you want?" "I request access to all historical battle data. Everything the Academy has on the Dominion." Oz made a sound that might have been a laugh. "All of it. That is thousands of years of records. You have 2 weeks. I read fast." The Admiral's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Very well. I will grant you access. I doubt you will find anything useful. Better minds than yours have studied that data for centuries." "Thank you, Admiral." Taeho walked away. He did not tell Voss that he had no interest in what better minds had found. He was interested in what they had missed. For the next 5 days, Taeho and Hana barely slept. They read reports from 300 years ago. They studied ship designs, battle formations, communication patterns. The 3rd member of their team, a young officer named Baek Dong-soo, brought them food and coffee and helped organize the data. On the 6th night, Hana found something. "Taeho," her voice was strange, quiet, almost scared. He came to her screen. She pointed at a series of reports buried deep in the archives. They were Coalition intelligence summaries from the last 6 months. Someone had flagged them as low priority. Someone had decided they were not important. Energy signatures at the galaxy's edge, Henna said. 17 of them. Moving in formation. The pattern matches old Dominion scout vessels. Tejo felt cold. They're not dormant. No, they've been mobilizing for months. Maybe longer. And no one noticed because no one was looking, or because no one wanted to see. They sat in silence. Around them, the academy slept. Other students dreamed of glory and honors. They did not know that the hypothetical enemy was waking up. We need to tell someone, Dongsu said. He was young, only 22. His hands were shaking. Who? Hana asked. We're humans. They don't listen to us. They never have. Tejo stood. He walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an ancient enemy was preparing for war, and the galaxy was looking the other way. Then we don't tell them, he said finally. We tell Earth. Hana understood immediately. She opened an encrypted channel, one that the Academy did not monitor. It connected to a single receiver on the other side of the galaxy. A receiver in the office of Earth's Minister of Defense? This is Agent Yoon, she spoke quietly. Priority 1. The Dominion is active. I repeat, the Dominion is active. The Coalition does not know. Advise. The response came 3 hours later. It was only for words. Begin preparing. We believe you. Tejo looked at his teammates. They were scared. They were young. They were far from home. But they were also ready. The exam wants a hypothetical battle plan, he said. So we'll give them one. But it won't be hypothetical. It will be real. Every detail, every supply line, every retreat path. And when the time comes, Earth will be ready. Hana nodded slowly. They'll laugh at us. Let them laugh. Laughter never won a war. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere among them, death was coming. And 3 humans in a room full of old data were the only ones who knew. The exam was in 9 days. The war would come sooner. On Earth, in a building with no windows, Park Ji-won read the message 3 times. She was 62 years old. Her hair was gray and her eyes were sharp like broken glass. She had been Minister of Defense for 11 years. In that time, she had done things that no one in the Coalition knew about. She pressed a button on her desk. A hologram appeared. A man in a naval uniform looked back at her. His name was Choi Woo-jin. He was captain of the UES Resolve, humanity's most powerful warship, a ship that officially did not exist. Minister Woo-jin said, I received the alert. Is it confirmed? 2 of our people at the Coalition Academy found the evidence. The Dominion is waking up. Scout vessels are already inside Coalition space. Woo-jin was silent for a moment. He was a calm man, the kind who never raised his voice, even when ships burned around him. The Coalition. They don't believe it. They dismissed our intelligence reports 6 months ago. They called it human paranoia, and now, Ji-won leaned back in her chair. Through the hologram, she could see the bridge of the Resolve behind Woo-jin. Officers moved quietly at their stations. The ship was hidden in the outer solar system, behind the orbit of Neptune, where no one would think to look.
Ow.
We do what we always planned, she said. Operation Ember goes live in 72 hours. Get the fleet ready. The fleet is always ready, Minister. That's why we built it. After the call ended, Ji-won stood and walked to a wall covered in maps. Not maps of Earth, but maps of the galaxy. Red dots marked Coalition military positions. Blue dots marked human assets. There were many more blue dots than anyone outside this room knew about. For 40 years, humanity had smiled and nodded at Coalition meetings. They had accepted being called young and primitive. They had watched as their warnings were ignored. And quietly, secretly, they had built a fleet that could fight the nightmares that others refused to see. It was not revenge. It was not pride. It was simply survival. Humans had learned long ago, through centuries of blood and fire on their own world, that hoping for the best meant dying when the worst arrived. Back at the academy, the examination presentations began. Each species showed their battle strategies with pride and ceremony. The Rahani went first. Their plan was impressive on screen, full of complex maneuvers and elegant formations. Admiral Voss nodded with approval. The Korbaks presented next. Their strategy focused on speed and confusion, using small ships to harass larger enemies. The instructors praised their creativity. The Velthari offered a plan based on defensive positions and resource control. It was patient and methodical, like the Velthari themselves. One by one, the species showed their work. Some were good, some were excellent. All of them were theoretical. When the humans' turn came, the hall grew quiet. Not with respect, but with amusement. Several students whispered to each other. A Rahani cadet made a clicking sound that meant laughter. Taeho walked to the center platform. Hana and Dongsu stood behind him. He did not carry notes. He did not need them. Everett Hing was in his head, burned there by 9 days of preparation. "Begin," Admiral Voss said. His voice sounded bored. Taeho activated the display. A map of coalition space appeared, but it looked different from the others. It was not clean and simple. It was crowded with information. Supply routes, communication relay points, civilian population centers, evacuation corridors, medical station locations, every detail that a real war would need. "Our strategy assumes 3 things," Taeho began. His voice was calm and clear. First, that the Dominion will attack without warning. Second, that they will target civilian areas to create panic. Third, that coalition response will be slow, because command structures are not unified. Admiral Voss leaned forward slightly. His 4 eyes narrowed. "We have divided coalition space into 17 defensive sectors," Taeho continued. "Each sector has assigned response fleets, predetermined fallback positions, and civilian evacuation protocols. Communication blackout procedures are included in case primary networks are destroyed." Hana stepped forward and expanded part of the map. "We have also identified the 12 most likely attack vectors based on historical Dominion behavior. For each vector, we have prepared specific counter-strategies and resource allocation plans." The room was silent now. No one was laughing. "Our supply lines run through secondary routes," Dongsu added, pointing at thin blue lines on the map. "If main shipping lanes are cut, we can maintain fleet operations for 60 days using alternative channels." Taeho finished the presentation with a summary of retreat protocols. "If we cannot win a battle, we save lives. Every ship, every station has orders for controlled withdrawal. We do not waste soldiers on lost causes." When he stopped speaking, the silence stretched long. Admiral Voss stared at the map like he was seeing something impossible. "Cadet Kang," Voss said slowly, "this is extremely detailed for a hypothetical exercise." "Yes, Admiral. You have included logistics that no one asked for. Medical support, refugee management, communication redundancies. These are not parts of the examination requirements." "I know, Admiral. Then why include them?" Taeho met the old Rethanese eyes without fear. "Because hypothetical enemies don't kill people. Real ones do. And when real enemies come, logistics win wars, not glory." A murmur ran through the hall. Some students looked impressed. Others looked offended. The Korbaks cadet's scales had turned a confused shade of purple. Admiral Voss waved his hand. "Thank you, Cadet. You may sit down. The evaluation committee will consider your unusual approach." Taeho nodded and returned to his seat. Hana squeezed his arm briefly. They had done their part. Now they could only wait. That night, on the other side of the galaxy, Captain Choi Woo-jin stood on the bridge of the Resolve. Around him, 35 other ships held position in the darkness between planets. They were painted black with no running lights, invisible against the void. Minister Park's voice came through the secure channel. "The students have presented the plan. The Academy thinks it's just an exam. They don't know it's a real operation." "When do we move?" Woo-jin asked. "All 72 hours. We wait for the Dominion to make the first move." Then we show the galaxy what humans have been building in the dark. Wu Jin looked at his crew. Young men and women, trained in secret, prepared for a war no one else believed was coming. They were afraid. They were brave. They were human. And the coalition? He asked. We don't tell them until it's already done. They wouldn't believe us anyway. The channel closed. Wu Jin sat in his command chair and watched the stars. Somewhere out there, an ancient enemy was coming, and humanity would meet them alone, at least at first. The first attack came at dawn, coalition time. 3 border stations died in less than an hour. They had no warning. One moment, the stations were full of life. Scientists, workers, families. The next moment, there was only fire and silence. At the academy, alarms screamed through every corridor. Students and instructors ran to the war room, a massive chamber filled with screens and tactical displays. What they saw made them freeze. The Dominion had returned. Dark ships poured through the border like a river of death. Their weapons tore through coalition defenses as if they were paper. The few military vessels in the area tried to fight back, but they were too few and too surprised. They burned like candles in a storm. Admiral Voss stood at the center of the chaos, shouting orders that no one could follow. The coalition's communication network was already failing. Fleet commanders couldn't reach each other. No one knew who was in charge. No one knew what to do. In the corner of the room, Taeho watched with Hana and Dongsu. Their faces were calm, but their hearts were racing. They had known this was coming. They had tried to warn everyone. Now the warning was written in fire across the stars. The coalition fleet is scattered, Hana said quietly. It will take them 6 hours to organize a response. Maybe more. Too long, Taeho replied. The Dominion will reach the second defensive line by then. Then something appeared on the tactical display that made everyone stop. New contacts. Ships emerging from fold space directly into the combat zone. But they were not coalition vessels. Their signatures were different. Unknown. A young Corvax officer checked her console 3 times before speaking. Admiral, these ships are not in our database. They're human. Admiral Voss turned slowly. His 4 eyes found Taeho across the room. Human ships. Explained. Taeho walked forward. Every eye in the room followed him. He felt small under their stares, but his voice did not shake. The United Earth ship Resolve, Admiral. And 35 support vessels. They have been waiting for this day for a long time. Waiting? How did you know? Because we were paying attention when no one else was. On the display, the human fleet moved into formation. They were smaller than coalition capital ships, built for speed and precision rather than raw power. But they moved together like a single creature, perfectly coordinated. Perfectly prepared. Hana stepped beside Taeho and pointed at the tactical display. Look at their formation. It matches our examination strategy exactly. The 17 defensive sectors, the fallback positions, the communication protocols. Admiral Voss stared at the screen. His voice was barely a whisper. That's the student's hypothetical. It was never hypothetical, Admiral Hana said. We just let you think it was. Far from the academy, in the fire and chaos of real battle, Captain Choi Woo-jin commanded from the bridge of the Resolve. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. They had trained for this moment for years. Now the training was real. Enemy formation spotted, his tactical officer reported. 47 Dominion warships bearing down on the civilian convoy. Woo-jin studied the display. The convoy was carrying 10,000 refugees from the destroyed border stations. If the Dominion reached them, there would be no survivors. All ships execute pattern Gamma 7, he ordered. We put ourselves between the enemy and those civilians. No one gets through. The human fleet moved like dancers. They had practiced this maneuver 1,000 times in simulation. Now they did it for real, with death waiting on every side. Lieutenant Baek-soo-min gripped the controls of her fighter. She was 23 years old. This was her first real combat mission. Her hands were shaking, but she kept her voice steady on the communication channel. Red Squadron, form on me. We're covering the convoy's escape route. Her squadron followed. 12 fighters against a fleet of warships. The odds were terrible, but the convoy needed time, and time was measured in lives. The first Dominion cruiser fired at them. Sumin pulled her ship into a tight roll, dodging beams of energy that could have vaporized her in an instant. Her squadron scattered and regrouped, drawing the enemy's attention away from the fleeing civilians. "We can't fight them directly," her wingman called out. "We're too small. We don't need to fight them," Sumin replied. "We just need to slow them down." She led her squadron in a weaving attack pattern, striking at the Dominion ship's sensors and communication arrays. They couldn't destroy the cruisers, but they could blind them. Confused enemies made mistakes. Mistakes bought time. Behind them, the civilian convoy jumped to safety. 10,000 lives saved. Back at the academy, the war room watched in stunned silence as the battle unfolded. The human fleet held the line. Where coalition forces had crumbled in minutes, the humans fought with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural. A Velthari counselor named Thren stood near Teho. He was old, with bark skin turned silver with age. He was one of the few aliens who had always treated humans with respect. Now he looked at Teho with something new in his amber eyes. Something like awe. "Your people," Thren said slowly. "You knew this would happen. You planned for it, yes? For how long?" Teho turned to face the old counselor. His eyes were tired, but steady. "Since the day we joined the coalition and realized no one else was paying attention, you all looked at the galaxy and saw peace. We looked and saw what peace was hiding." On the display, the Dominion's advance had stopped. For the first time in 300 years, something had made them pause. That something was a species they had never heard of. A species the rest of the galaxy had dismissed as primitive and young. But the battle was not over. It had barely begun. Admiral Voss approached Teho. The old Rathani moved slowly, as if the weight of his years had suddenly become heavier. "Cadet Kong, I owe you an apology." "Apologies can wait, Admiral. Right now, we need to coordinate the coalition response with our fleet. My people cannot hold the line alone forever." Voss nodded. For the first time, he looked at Teho, not as a student, not as a primitive human, but as an equal. "What do you need?" Teho turned back to the tactical display. The Dominion was regrouping. More ships were coming. The first battle was won, but the war was just beginning. "Everything," he said. "We need everything you have, and we need it now." The stars were burning. But for the first time, someone was fighting back. The Coalition High Council met in emergency session. The chamber was filled with representatives from every species, their voices mixing into a storm of anger, fear, and confusion. On the central display, the battle still raged. Human ships fought and died alongside the few coalition vessels that had managed to reach the front lines. A Rathani counselor stood and pointed his forearms at the human delegation. "They built a secret fleet. They lied to us for decades. This is a violation of every treaty we have signed." Others shouted in agreement. The chamber echoed with accusations. Then the display flickered, and a new face appeared. Park Ji-won, Minister of Defense for the United Earth Government. Her gray hair was pulled back tight. Her eyes were calm like deep water, hiding sharp rocks beneath. The chamber fell silent. "You want to discuss treaties?" Ji-won's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Fine, let's discuss them. For 40 years, we brought you evidence of threats. We showed you the Dominion's movements. We warned you about increased activity at the galaxy's edge. And what did you do?" She paused. No one spoke. "You ignored us. You called us paranoid. You called us primitive. You told us we were too young to understand how the galaxy worked." Her voice grew harder. "So we stopped asking for permission. We started preparing for what we knew was coming. You can hate us for it later, counselors. After we've finished saving your worlds." The display showed a map of the war. Red arrows marked Dominion advances. Blue symbols marked the positions of the human fleet, still fighting, still holding. "My ships are buying you time," Ji-won continued. "Use it wisely. Get your fleets organized. Get your people to safety. And when you're ready to fight alongside us, instead of complaining about us, you know where to find us." The transmission ended. The council chamber exploded into chaos again. But this time, some voices were different. Some were quieter. Some were ashamed, far from the political storms. The real war continued. General Okung led the ground assault on Station Bareth 7. The station had been captured in the first hours of the invasion. 2,000 civilians were trapped inside. Held as shields by Dominion soldiers, Kyung was 55 years old. With scars on his face from battles that official records said never happened, he had fought in places that no one talked about, against enemies that humanity had faced alone. This was different. This time, the galaxy was watching. "Team leaders report status," he said into his communication unit. Voices came back. "Alpha Team at the East Airlock. Bravo Team cutting through the maintenance tunnels. Charlie Team in position at the power station. Remember the rules," Kuhn said. "Civilian safety is priority 1. We don't sacrifice their lives to make ours easier. Clear?" "Clear, sir." They moved through the station like shadows. The Dominion soldiers were strong and fast, but they didn't know the station's layout like the humans did. Hannah had provided complete blueprints from Coalition archives. Every corridor, every hiding spot, every shortcut. The fighting was brutal and close. Hyung lost 3 soldiers in the first hour. Good people, young people, gone in a flash of enemy fire. He marked their names in his memory. He would remember them later. Right now, he had a job to do. By the 6th hour, they had pushed the enemy back to the central core. The civilians huddled in a cargo bay, terrified but alive. Kyung looked at them. Rathani, Korvax, Velthari, none of them were human. All of them would have died if his people hadn't come. A Rathani soldier lay wounded near the door. His shell was cracked, green blood seeping through. He was dying, and he knew it. Kyung knelt beside him. "Why?" the Rathani whispered. His compound eyes were fading. "Your people. We mocked you. We called you primitive. I know. Why did you come for us?" Kyung thought about the question. He thought about Earth, about the wars they had fought among themselves before learning to fight together. About the lessons written in blood across human history. "Because that's not who we are," he said finally. "We don't let people die just because they were wrong about us." The Rathani's eyes closed. His breathing stopped. Kyung stood and gave orders to evacuate the survivors. On another part of the battlefield, Dr. Shin Yunbai worked without rest. Her medical frigate, the Hope of Seoul, had become the main treatment center for wounded from a dozen species. The ship was designed for 300 patients. It now held over 800 EU in-by moved between beds, checking wounds, giving orders, saving lives. She had been a doctor for 20 years. She had seen terrible things, but nothing like this. A Velthari child lay on a bed, her bark skin burned black from an explosion. Her amber eyes looked up at Yunbai with fear. "It hurts," the child said. "I know, little one." Yunbai adjusted the pain medication. "But you're safe now. We're going to take care of you. Are you human?" "Yes." The child was quiet for a moment. "My father said humans are dangerous." Yunbai smiled gently. "Maybe he was right. But we're dangerous to the things that hurt you, not to you." The child closed her eyes and slept. Yunbai moved on to the next patient. Hours blurred together. She lost count of how many she saved. She lost count of how many she couldn't. Each death was a weight on her heart, but she kept moving. Doctors don't have the luxury of grief during a crisis. Then the news came through that changed everything. The Dominion's main fleet had arrived. Taeho received the report at the Academy War Room. His face went pale. Beside him, Admiral Voss studied the new tactical data with growing horror. "The force we've been fighting. It was just the Vanguard," Voss said. "A scouting force. The real fleet is 10 times larger." Hana pulled up the numbers. Over 400 capital ships, thousands of support vessels. This isn't an invasion force. This is an extinction fleet. The war room fell into terrified silence. Even the most optimistic projections showed total defeat. The Coalition and humanity combined didn't have enough ships to match those numbers. Taiho closed his eyes. He thought about Earth, about Minister Park and her secret plans, about all the preparations they had made for a day like this. Counselor Thren, he said suddenly. The old Velthari stepped forward. Yes, contact Earth. Tell Minister Park that we need everything. Every ship, every weapon, every option we have left. Taiho opened his eyes. They were hard like iron. Tell her it's time for Project Dawn. Thren didn't ask what Project Dawn was. Something in Taiho's voice told him he didn't want to know until he had to. Around the war room, screens showed the Dominion fleet advancing. A wave of death rolling toward everything they had ever known. But for the first time, the galaxy wasn't facing it alone. And humanity still had cards they hadn't played. The real war had just begun. The galaxy held its breath in the Vareth corridor. The largest space battle in recorded history was about to begin. The Dominion's extinction fleet filled the stars like a dark cloud. 400 capital ships surrounded by swarms of smaller vessels. Against them stood the combined forces of the Coalition and humanity's secret fleet. Together, they numbered less than 200 ships. Tae-Ho was no longer a cadet. The Coalition had given him an emergency field commission. He was now strategic commander of combined forces. A title that meant nothing, except that everyone was looking to him for answers. He stood in the command center of the Resolve, surrounded by officers from 6 different species. Captain Choi Woo-jin sat in the command chair, his face calm despite what was coming. Hana worked at the intelligence station, tracking enemy movements. Admiral Voss watched through a holographic display from the Academy, his 4 eyes fixed on the battlefield. The enemy is entering weapon range in 15 minutes, Hana reported. Taiho studied the tactical display. The numbers were impossible. Even with perfect coordination, they couldn't win a direct fight. But direct fights weren't humanity's style. Project Dawn, he said. Is it ready? Minister Park's voice came through the secure channel from Earth, like it's been ready for 15 years. We just hoped we'd never need to use it. What is Project Dawn? Admiral Voss asked. Tae-Ho turned to face the display. When humanity joined the Coalition, we knew we were weak. We knew that someday something would come that the galaxy couldn't stop. So we prepared. He pulled up a map showing Coalition space. Hundreds of small dots appeared, scattered across asteroid fields and dead moons. Relativistic kinetic weapons, Taiho explained. Tungsten rods with small engines attached. We placed them in hidden locations across the galaxy over the past 30 years. At full acceleration, they can reach 12% of light speed. Voss was silent for a long moment. You planted weapons throughout Coalition space. Without telling anyone, would you have listened if we did? The Admiral had no answer. Each projectile weighs 1 ton, Hana added. At that speed, the kinetic energy is greater than any nuclear weapon. And unlike missiles, they can't be shot down or jammed. The Dominion fleet grew closer. 10 minutes to weapon range, Captain Woo-jin spoke without looking away from his display. The problem is targeting. At those speeds, we need to know exactly where the enemy will be. 1 second of miscalculation means we miss by thousands of kilometers. That's why we need to hold them here, Taiho said. In the Vareth corridor, pin them in place long enough for the projectiles to arrive. Lieutenant Beek Suman's voice came through from her fighter. Commander Red Squadron is in position. Whatever you need, we're ready. Taiho closed his eyes. So many people, so many lives, depending on a plan made by students and secrets kept for decades. If it failed, everyone died. If it worked, they might save everything. All ships, he announced. This is Commander Kang. Today, we fight not for victory, but for time. Every minute we hold the line is a minute that brings salvation closer. Stay together. Trust your training. And remember, the galaxy is watching. The battle began. Woo-jin led the human fleet in the first charge. They didn't try to match the Dominion's firepower. Instead, they struck at vulnerable points, hit, and retreat, drawing the enemy deeper into the corridor where they couldn't spread out. General Kyun commanded the ground forces that had taken position on asteroids throughout the corridor. They set traps and ambushes, making the Dominion cautious.
Oh.
Within the wind with the sensei and a sense and with an asset with I at on the rest of sent sawams and saying was sent them She had 17 confirmed kills now. She didn't count them. Counting meant thinking about the lives she had taken, and she couldn't afford to think about that yet. The coalition ships fought beside the humans. Rathani cruisers formed defensive lines. Korvax raiders struck at enemy supply ships. Velthari destroyers provided heavy fire support. For the first time in history, the galaxy fought as one. But the Dominion was too strong. One by one, ships began to fall. The Resolve took heavy damage on its port side. Wujin ordered emergency repairs, but they were fighting with half power. A Rathani battleship exploded, taking 200 crew with it. A Korvax carrier was torn apart by enemy fire. "We're losing too many ships," Hana reported. "We can't hold much longer." Tejo watched the display. The projectiles were still 3 minutes away. 3 minutes that felt like years. All ships fall back to secondary positions. Concentrate fire on the enemy flagship. We need to keep their attention. The Dominion commander must have sensed victory. His flagship pushed forward, leading the charge to finish off the defenders. It was the largest ship in the fleet, bristling with weapons that could crack moons. "Sit," Tejo whispered. "Come closer." The flagship moved into the center of the corridor. Project Dawn targets confirmed. Minister Park's voice came through. Impact in 30 seconds. The Dominion commander never saw it coming. A tungsten rod, traveling at 12% of light speed, hit the flagship directly in the center. At that velocity, the impact released more energy than a star's heartbeat. The massive ship didn't explode so much as cease to exist. One moment it was there. The next, there was only light and expanding debris. More projectiles followed. 20, 30, 50 impacts across the Dominion fleet. Ships that had seemed invincible vanished like shadows at dawn. The Dominion formation shattered. Without their flagship, without their command structure, the remaining ships fell into chaos. They tried to retreat, but they were still in the corridor, still pinned by the defenders, who now pressed their advantage. The battle turned. What had been a desperate last stand became a pursuit. Coalition and human ships worked together, hunting down the scattered enemy. It took 6 more hours, but by the end, the extinction fleet was destroyed. 3 months later, Tejo stood before the rebuilt academy. The war was over, but the galaxy would never be the same. The Dominion had been broken, their remaining forces retreating to the darkness at the edge of known space. It would take them centuries to recover if they ever did. The coalition had changed too. Humans were no longer dismissed as primitive. They were respected, sometimes feared, always watched. They had saved everyone, and everyone knew it. Admiral Voss approached Tejo after the memorial ceremony. The old Rathani moved slowly now, tired from months of war. "We're offering you a permanent position," Voss said. "Head instructor of strategic studies. You would shape the next generation of military leaders." Tejo considered the offer. It was everything he might have dreamed of before the war. Recognition, respect, a future at the galaxy's most prestigious academy. "I'm grateful, Admiral. But I have students back home who need what we learned here." "And what is that?" Tejo looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, other threats waited. Other nightmares that the galaxy hadn't noticed yet. The Dominion wasn't the last enemy. It was just the first that humanity had faced among the stars. That the galaxy won't save itself, he said. That someone has to stand watch. And that sometimes the exam isn't hypothetical. You have to be ready when it counts. Hana joined him as they walked toward the shuttle that would take them home. She looked different now. Older. Harder. The war had changed her, like it had changed everyone. What happens next? She asked. We go back to Earth. We train more people. We build more ships. We prepare for whatever comes after. Do you think they'll listen now? The coalition? Tejo smiled, just slightly. Maybe. Maybe not. It doesn't matter. We'll be ready either way. Admiral Voss watched them board the shuttle. He remembered the day they had arrived. 2 young humans nobody took seriously. Now the galaxy owed them everything. He understood something he had missed before. Humans weren't primitive. They weren't aggressive or paranoid. They were simply survivors. Their history, bloody and terrible, had taught them lessons that peaceful species never learned. The shuttle lifted off and vanished into the stars. The galaxy slept. A little safer now. Not because the threats were gone, but because humanity was watching, and they were always ready.